With getting so wrapped up with the Halloween-themed beers this year, I didn't get a chance to brew some traditional Oktoberfest seasonal beers. But then I realized one of the many beauties of brewing for yourself is that seasons don't really matter. So Novemberfest starts now. Welcome to Big Monster Brewing, the Anvil Foundry Edition. I am Matt, and in this episode, we are going to brew a Märzen, the beer that was, I was going to say originally the traditional Oktoberfest beer, but I think in many ways it still is. It's also accompanied by another beer, which is going to be featured on this channel very shortly as well. But before we get into all of that, let me say if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. Thank you to everyone that has. I looked the other day and I was past 200 subscribers. Hadn't really been paying attention, so thank you for everyone that has. And again, if you haven't, please do and hit that notification bell. There is going to be a lot more Anvil brewing coming along as this channel continues. So making what is traditionally a beer for an event and a season that is months past now is not the strangest thing, of course, to happen in 2020, and probably not the strangest thing to happen in home brewing by a long shot. So I didn't really feel at all uncomfortable tackling this new challenge. What I'm doing for this beer, which I said in the intro, I'm making a Märzen, and it is it's certainly one of my favorite styles to drink. It might be one of my first ever styles that opened up the larger world of beer past the American lager and light lagers that if you are not raised in a beer culture that you would typically start out with. It's a beer that I really enjoy in just a lot of ways. I like from the commercial side that it's kind of a nice treat once a year during a limited time span. And then past that, I just really like the taste of it. As much of a hophead as I can be with pale ales and IPAs, I am just as big a fan of beers that really feature heavy malt profiles, or I should say rich and distinctive and maybe even complex malt styles. I don't even necessarily need to be heavy. And I've always found a Märzen to be a really great example of that, and that's why I wanted to brew it. Another thing I found really attractive about this style to take on and brew and do a video on is that it is also a lager, and I've just recently, if you haven't already seen it, kind of dialed in a lager process I'm really happy with. I've had one success so far on a German Pils. I want to see if I can repeat that process. Obviously, I'm going to have a different result. It's a different style beer, but I want to see if that process is something I'm going to be continuing to use going forward. Now, speaking of that, this brew is another hybrid brew where I'm mashing on the electric Anvil foundry and I'll be boiling on gas. This time, it's to kind of keep all of those particular pieces of brewing in play because I'm going to do two beers. When I do a lager, it does take up the fermentation chamber at a much lower temperature to start out with than my ales, so it kind of cuts off making more than one beer, and this thing can fit 3 or 4 depending on what size I brew. So in one day, I'm going to be brewing 2 lagers so I can fill that fermentation chamber to at least half capacity and get more return on my fermentation time, I guess you could say. So having the gas boil going while I'm mashing the second beer cuts maybe a quarter to a third of my brew day down, which is a bigger deal when you're making multiple beers as opposed to one. But we can't start making a beer without a recipe, so let's take a look at the grist that I put together for this Märzen. This being a very malt-forward beer, we're starting with some really rich base malts that we're splitting right down the middle of 46% Munich malt and 46% Maris Otter. To that, we are just going to add one specialty grain, but it's one of my favorites, and we're going to put in 8% of British 5060 L malt. I'm doing something with this brew day, particularly in the mash, that I've not done before at the Anvil Foundry. And I also neglected to record the specific steps. So it's a pretty simple concept that I can talk through, I think, in this segment. And what that is I'm doing a step mash. And I'm doing it for a couple reasons. One, obviously, to see what it brings to the beer. And two, when I see comparison charts of these all-in-one units, step mashing is, or a form or some kind of phrase like that, is usually listed as a feature, and the Anvil is typically featured as not being able to do that. That's not entirely true. What that means in comparison to some of the other units is that you can't automatically set it to do a step mash, but you can certainly adjust the temperature all you want during the mash process. You just have to have a separate device or some way to keep track of time so you know when to make those changes. For this, I'm going to do a rather simple 3-step process. The first step for the beta amylase conversion, the second for the alpha amylase conversion, and then the typical mash out that I do for almost every beer. For that first step, I am going to mash in at 145 degrees Fahrenheit and then hold that for 20 minutes. After that, I am going to raise the overall temperature of the mash to 158 degrees, and once that hits 158, I'm going to start another timer for 40 minutes. Then for that final bit, the mash out, like you've probably seen on almost every one of my brews, I'm going to ramp that up to 168 degrees and then hold it for 10 more minutes. This is going to be a 2.5 gallon batch mashed with the 6.5 gallon foundry. The entire mash time takes about 90 minutes when you include those 2 temperature increases that I do during the mash process. That's a little longer than the typical infusion 60-minute mash that I do with the foundry. After that last mash step, I take the malt pipe out of the foundry and sparge with a gallon of 168 degree water that I heated up during the mash time. After that sparge and letting the last bit of the sweet wort drip out of the malt pipe, which takes about 10 minutes, give or take, I transfer the entire contents of the foundry into my boil kettle. From there, I get it on the propane burner and get ready for a full 90-minute boil on this one. With this being a malt-forward and malt-focused beer, the boil additions are incredibly simple for this one. For the hops, there are 22 IBUs of Zaz hops at 60 minutes. And then that is it for hops. Then there's my usual additions of yeast nutrients at 10 minutes and a little bit of Whirlfloc at 2 minutes. Chill the wort as low as I can this time before putting it into the fermenter. Then I transfer it to the fermentation fridge and I drop this to a low temperature of 52 degrees. I made a pretty large starter of yeast 2124 Bohemian Lager that I'm going to split between the 2 beers. I follow that brewlosophy method of lagering again, which I'll put the link in the show notes and I'll put it on the screen right here to see if I can duplicate the pretty good success I had with the German pills. Once that's all done, I keg it, I carb it with my Blickman Quick Carb, and then I put it on tap after a very long absence of beer on my kegerator taps. And from there, I can finally give it a taste. It is tasting time, and I do feel the holiday joy right now because I'm about to try the Märzen. The only unfortunate thing about this shot you're looking at right now is you didn't get to see, you can kind of see, but you didn't get to see how well the head retention was holding up because it took me, it's amazing how things go wrong when you really want to do something. I had to get the recording going and there was a glitch with the camera. But that whole time, up until the camera was rolling, the head was at the top of the glass. But there's still a pretty decent head for it sitting for a few minutes. And let us talk about the color and the clarity. And I think the clarity is coming through pretty well on the camera. It's always a difficult thing to seem to capture with this camera, but this time I think you see it. I did use some Biofine. findings in the keg along with the roll flock, and I think that helped everything drop out like perfectly. It is pretty clear. It's coming up on crystal clear. I don't know if you call it brilliantly clear. I think you actually kind of need a halo to get the brilliantly clear description from a judge, but it's really clear, and the color is absolutely gorgeous. It's the exact color I expect from a Märzen, from a multi-amber lager style. That's exactly it. Gotta taste it. Let's go, or I have to experience it, so let's get the aroma first. It is that expected sweet touch of caramel, little bit of just a touch of burnt sugar aroma. Just rolls right off of that. No noticeable hops, maybe. I don't think there's any. I'm not even going to try to find some because there isn't, and there doesn't necessarily need to be. Very sweet, very pleasant. Not sugary sweet, not cloyingly sweet. Just that little bit of especially caramel aroma. Absolutely lovely. Let's get to the main event here. That is so clean. That lagering method that Brewlosophy posted on their website. I know they've done some podcasts and some other posts since then of quick lagering, but I'm at the point of swearing by that original post they did. I don't even know when it was, but on their website. If you've struggled with lagering, you've never done it before, check it out. Again, the link is in the notes of this video. It's made a world of difference in my lagers. That is so clean. The taste is so pleasant. There's the malty sweetness, that caramel, the same exact aromas are coming out on my tongue the second it hits it. I'm going to try it again. It is just, this style is just so much of a pleasure to drink. I already have kind of my entire taste for food of any kind lean towards the sweet end and less the savory. So having this malt forward sweetness is exactly what my palate just loves. And it is, again, with the clean fermentation, without it being cloyingly sweet. There's a difference between sugary sweet and other sweet elements. I'm sure you know. I don't need to explain this. I think I'm over-explaining in this video alone. But it's all there. And just that little bit. It's a little more than a hint, but it's not the main flavor of that caramel. And even that burnt sugar, that dark, rich caramel comes through and just is so nicely balanced with that malt. I am beyond pleased. This will not last long. This will not last long at all. I am so happy with the results because this is one of the style I really wanted to get going. And I was afraid of starting with just one specialty mold. I'd be tinkering with this for a while. Right now, and we'll see how it ages. Maybe that'll go away. Right now, there's no reason to change anything in this. In fact, it's a beer I want to enter in a competition, but I don't want to give away any bottles to a competition. That's the dilemma I'm in. I'm proud of it enough to see what judges think, but I personally love it so much that I don't want to give any away. Although, maybe that's not a terrible idea. But one more before we go. Yeah, that style, it's just a great style. I mean, I can see why it became a tradition for an annual drinking event. That's just such a pleasure to drink. That's what it really comes down to. I mean, that's the only other word. It's tasty. It's malt forward. It's a definite showcase of what malts bring to a beer, and it's just a pleasure to drink. All right, that is it. So before I go, I have to say thank you for watching, and let me know what you think of the style, the Märzen style yourself, or even any beers for Oktoberfest. In fact, if you the next video is going to be a fest beer. I think I kind of talked about that a little bit in the beginning. It's been a while since I've recorded that now, but following up with another Oktoberfest style as a fest beer, if there's another style that you enjoy or brew during Oktoberfest, I'd love to hear about it because I would certainly love to try it again. Maybe make a April Fest. Who knows? So, all right, that is it. I'll say one more time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in that next episode.